Sup, brah? I get my news from Facebook, because I'm lazy. I get my news from Fox, because I'm not a liberal snowflake, and nobody is going to start a war on Christmas on my watch. I listen to NPR, because I'm a liberal. I get my news from Breitbart, because even Fox ain't right-wing enough for me. Hello, Governor. I'm an old British stereotype for some reason. I watch the Today Show for my news because I like people who pussyfoot around the issues and waste most of my morning talking about things that aren't news, like cooking tips and the latest stupid thing Kanye did. I get my news from InfoWars because I'm angry at the world and everything is a cover-up. Hello, I get my news from President Trump Twitter because I'm Russian. Welcome to Mr. Newton's Neighborhood. Can fake news be deadly? There's your first tip in spotting fake news: sensational headlines. Today we'll talk about, in this order, 1. How is fake news spread? 2. What are the different types of fake news? 3. How can it be harmful? And most importantly, 4. We'll give you tips on how to spot fake news. Odds are, you've believed at least one fake news story in the last year. So let's get to it. Topic numero uno. How is fake news spread? Is it mainstream media? Is it conservative media? Is it liberal media? Is it fringe conspiracy media? Is it the alt-right or alt-left media? Is it social media? Is it fake news sites? Was it Russia during the election? Yes! It's all of those things and more! They're all guilty to some extent. So how is it spread? Well, put simply, by you! I'm sure many of you heard that the top way fake news is spread is on Facebook. Well, that's sort of true. On Facebook, it's spread virally by you. People often assume that what people post, especially people that they respect, is true news. And of course, if the lie appeals to what you already believe, such as slandering the candidate that you hate, then you're already biased and psychologically more likely to believe it. You use your good old confirmation bias when seeking out information that confirms what you already believe and ignore what goes against what you already believe. We all do this, and what sucks most about it is we're usually not even aware we're doing it. I talk a bit more about confirmation bias in greater detail on the conspiracy theory episode. I've already filmed it, it's done, so subscribe so you don't miss that. Anyway, about 44% of American adults say at some time they've gotten their news from Facebook. That's 66% of Facebook users. However, that doesn't mean that's most people's main source of news. How many people regularly get their news from Facebook has been estimated to be around 18%. So basically, if you already believe certain kinds of bullshit, and you do because you're a human, that bullshit will pop up in your newsfeed based on your own interests. You are your own worst enemy when it comes to believing lies. Now, obviously, we can't just blame social media for the spread of fake news, since it's only about 18% of people who use it as a regular news source. Americans go to various types of news outlets for their facts. TV is surprisingly still the number one source of news at about 57%, followed by the internet at 38%, which also includes social media that we just talked about. Of that 38%, roughly 28% get news from news sites and news apps. And our preferred news sources help us confirm what we already believe, regardless of whether or not it's true. Damn you, confirmation bias! Okay, so on to topic number 2. What are the different kinds of fake news? First, there's the absence of news, which are just unimportant fluff pieces like tips on how to bake the perfect cookies, Kim Kardashian's ass, and the latest adorable viral video. Aww. Fluff pieces and viral videos aren't lies in the traditional sense, but you could argue that they're lies by omission to a small extent, by taking time away from important topics that may require more detail or are too nuanced to cover in short segments. If we remove the fluff, we can allow more time to explain complex problems that plague our world. These fluff pieces are often done on mainstream networks. Most alternative news sources and dedicated news channels waste little to no time on Kim Kardashian's voluptuous bottom. I'd say celebrity gossip and fluff pieces are the mildest form of fake news, but that fluff piece bullshit is probably not the reason you clicked on this video, so let's move on to our second offender in the fake news list. Accidental fake news. Accidental fake news is also probably not what you clicked on this for, but it's important too. And don't worry, we'll get to the more sinister fake news in just a second. Accidental fake news is where something false is reported due to an honest mistake or poor fact-checking. Accurate fact-checking is not always easy, especially if you're in a hurry to meet a deadline. Every news outlet is guilty of this at least once in a while. For example, during the Boston Marathon bombing, several major news outlets reported false information. They reported false information ranging from catching suspects when nobody is apprehended to showing photos of suspects who weren't actually suspects at all. Stuff like this happens sometimes during big events due to news agencies being in a rush to get the information out the fastest. I used the Boston Marathon as an example because there were quite a few errors that had to be corrected. Of course, it gets more complicated than innocent mistakes. Just a few weeks ago, Forbes did a smear piece on YouTuber PewDiePie. It was basically slander. They were cherry-picking parts of his videos to make him look racist. I was happy to see, though, that it did backfire on them, but most people aren't that lucky when they've become part of a slander piece. Their reputations can be permanently damaged. Okay, so the next and much more dubious topic on our fake news list is party bias and hyper-partisan news. Do you believe liberals are trying to give free rides to people on the welfare system? Or do you believe that conservatives are racist? Do you think liberals are trying to take your guns away? Or that all conservatives don't believe in climate change? Then you most likely consume hyper-partisan news. There are liberals with guns, and there are conservatives who believe in facts. Partisan and hyper-partisan news could be anything from political party biases unintentionally given in a slight slant to the news, all the way to intentionally fabricating stories to make the opposing party look bad. This is a good time to look at this graphic created by Vanessa Otero. It gives a great visual of where mainstream news outlets fall and who's more biased toward what party, and even shows some conspiracy theory news outlets. Otero is aware that her chart isn't 100% perfect, but it does give a pretty good approximation. It's important to remember that we all have biases. This can be a big problem in mainstream media. Fox News, for example, is notorious for its right-wing bias. Fair and balanced? Not even close. However, these guys are very aware that they're slanting the news in favor of the GOP. But whether the biases are intentional or not, these outlets will search out stories that make their party look good and ignore those that make their party look bad. A great example of far-right hyper-partisan news bordering on conspiracy theory is Breitbart, which made such ludicrous claims as Obama awarded himself the Department of Defense Medal for Distinguished Public Service. Another Breitbart doozy was in September when they posted an article with their classic tactic of using misleading information and insinuations. The story led readers to believe that FBI Director James Comey received bribes from the Clinton Foundation to let Hillary off on the email scandals. Just because Comey has worked with organizations that have partnered with or donated to the Clinton Foundation doesn't mean he was bribed. In our conspiracy theory video, I warn you to be suspicious of claims where there's no smoking gun and no paper trail. This was a great example of that. Although it is possible Comey was bribed, without evidence, it's just an accusation. So as you can see, things are often more nuanced than news paints it to be. People like things simple with a clear linear narrative. Us versus them. Good versus evil. And the news often even represents things this way. But unfortunately, life is not a Superman cartoon. Plus, it's not really easy to smear a candidate like Clinton with nuanced topics. For example, an honest Clinton smear campaign might have looked something like this.
Hillary Rodham Clinton. Do you really want a candidate who is investigated by the FBI for being careless with her emails, even though they found no evidence to prosecute her? Or what about the Clinton Whitewater thing in the 90s, where there was no evidence to prosecute her? And there's the Clinton Foundation scandal where there was no evidence to prosecute her. But wait, there's that Benghazi thing where Hillary was investigated and clearly shown to have done nothing wrong. Well, do you really want a candidate who keeps getting accused of doing bad things? I don't think so. And her jokes are so bad.
An honest and unbiased way to assess the candidates without letting our biases lead us astray would be to fact-check them. So here's something we actually can use against Hillary. She does lie. When fact-checked by PolitiFact, we can see that she told half-truths to mostly false statements 36% of the time, and that she flat out just lied over 12% of the time. She only told the truth about 52% of the time. See, Trump supporters? You don't need hyper-partisan fake or conspiratorial news to talk trash on Hillary. You can use the facts. But of course, to be unbiased, we can't stop there. We must also look at Trump and see how he lies. PolitiFact did a study that found Trump lied an average of once every 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Here's Trump's graphic. He told half-truths to mostly false statements 33% of the time, compared to Hillary's 36%. He flat-out lied 50% of the time, compared to Hillary's 12%. And he told the truth only 16% of the time, compared to Hillary's 52% truths. Oh shit. Is it too late to take the DeLorean back in time and rescue Doc so he can be president? If you vote strictly for a specific party, you are biased. There's no way around it, so check your shit just as closely as you check the shit of the opposing party. In many ways, our divide or our polarized country is actually an illusion, or at least an oversimplification. I'm sure you've heard the phrase fiscally conservative and socially liberal, which shows a lot of people mix and match and can't accurately identify with a party. So it's important to figure out where you lean so that you don't fall into traps of faulty thinking and confirmation bias. Okay, now things get more fun with intentionally misleading news. This is much worse than the mainstream hyper-partisan news. These are sites that most people are talking about when they use the term fake news. It's news that intentionally spreads misinformation, fabricated stories, and hoaxes. Its motives are usually for profit and sometimes even promoting political ideologies. So this does often have a party bias. They often use sensational headlines like, "Truth about blank exposed." I embarrassingly fell for a fake news story just a few months ago. I was pissed off and ranting for a good 30 minutes for no reason at all. Luckily, I calmed down and wanted more facts about the story and asked myself, wait a minute, why isn't this bigger news? Why hadn't I heard this from other outlets? So I started searching various news outlets and found nothing. It wasn't a true story. Well, it wasn't exactly true. These sites often take true stories and add falsehoods to them. If you create a lie rooted in the truth, it makes it easier to believe and will more likely spread. The site I fell for was abcnews.com.co. This wasn't the actual
CBS.
ABC News site. Some of these intentionally misleading news sites are made to look like official news sites. They just have an extra extension at the end of the site like .co. Some of the others are usatoday.com.co and washingtonpost.com.co, so look for those extra extensions at the end. Okay, so all the fake .co sites I just mentioned are owned by Justin Kohler. He started making fake news a few years ago as a way to point out alt-right extremism. In an interview with NPR, he said,
"The whole idea from the start was to build a site that could kind of infiltrate the echo chamber of the alt-right, publish blatantly or fictitious stories, and then be able to publicly denounce those stories and point out the fact that they were fiction."
His original motives were to make fools of conservatives, especially the extreme alt-right. But his motives must have changed to money when he found out how much he could make off of these sites, since he didn't seem to be out actively debunking them. So odds are if you were consuming as much anti-Hillary and pro-Donald stuff as possible, you probably fell for some fake news by Justin Kohler. He just wrote what people wanted to believe about Hillary. And he tried doing it to liberals too, but he said they would debunk it before it went viral. It didn't work as well on the libs enough to make decent money. And Kohler doesn't just own sites that mimic real news sites like the .co sites I mentioned. He also has some popular fake news sites that are their own entities, such as Firebrand Left, National Report, Conservative Frontline, and United Media Publishing. So if you get news from any of those sites, you're getting fake news intentionally made to make a mockery of you and make money off of you. Some of the other fake news sites include Empire News, The Last Line of Defense, The Boston Tribune, Currently, or however you say that, and Now News 8, which is made to look like a local news site. And of course, my favorite fake news site, InfoWars. But InfoWars actually fits into our next category of fake news, conspiracy theory. Okay, so conspiracy theory news. I actually love consuming conspiracy theory sites, articles, and videos for entertainment and a good laugh. But the sad thing is most people who consume conspiracy theory news and create it take it very seriously. Unlike our last topic, conspiracy theory news isn't necessarily intentionally misleading, but it's just as full of shit. However, there's different degrees of bullshit here. InfoWars is almost as extreme as you can get. It's run by the calm and rational conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
I'm not a slave. I've broken the conditioning. It doesn't work on me. If you don't agree, you'll be sent to a re-education camp. You're literally dealing with a psyop Satanist with black op command forces predicting the future. You understand that? Get out of the road, New World Order. Get out of my mind. I'm not here doing anything but opening the blinds to wake people up. You don't like the light, do you? Liberal, I'm liberal. We're liberal. Excuse me. I break free of your mind control, filth. Oh, you're never going to hear Jim Carrey talk about that because he's an authoritarian pig worshiper. Let's see what they look like. This is normal. Do you support court-martialing people for their religious views? Answer the question. No. We are gay reptoid space alien lovers. We're gonna kill you and your family. For a total takeover! Break the conditioning now!
InfoWars' Alex Jones promoted such ludicrous ideas as the Orlando, Sandy Hook, Boston Marathon, and Brussels attacks were faked, false flags orchestrated by the Obama administration. Alex Jones believes that the government has a weapon that can control tornadoes and that the 2004 tsunami in Southeast Asia was actually man-made. He thinks that the government is using chemicals on people to turn them gay. And of course he believes the Illuminati runs the world.
Illuminati confirmed.
So ask, what kinds of claims do your news sources make? If they have articles and videos full of conspiracy theories, they're not a reliable source. But why are Alex Jones and his sites InfoWars and Prison Planet dangerous? Who takes that shit seriously, right? Well, this guy does.
Donald, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be with you. I just want to finish by saying your reputation's amazing. I will not let you down. You will be very, very impressed, I hope.
Naturally, Alex Jones doesn't run the only conspiracy theory sites. There's also conspiracy theory sites based on pseudoscience like Natural News, who target well-intentioned people, often liberals in this case, who just want to be healthy and promote natural cures and alternative medicine and all that new agey hippie bullshit. But they also throw in some classic tinfoil hat claims like the dangers of chemtrails. But that being said, conspiracy theory news attracts people who ask questions. These are often really smart people who know things aren't right with our system and have a distrust of the government and authority, and often for good reason. I mean, I can understand that. How many of us are like, yeah, let's all just completely trust the government and authority figures, right? Nobody. So it's no wonder people fall for this stuff. I'll just say that if you get your news from a source that says the moon landing was fake, the Illuminati is running things behind the scenes, chemtrails are being sprayed on us for sinister purposes, vaccines cause autism, or that water fluoridation is dangerous, well, then you're getting news from conspiracy theory sites. Now, of course, politicians and CEOs are sometimes corrupt, but that doesn't mean they're all corrupt. So, that being said, here's a list of a few conspiracy theory news sources and sites. This list includes everything from left to right, religious to atheist, and well-written and thought-provoking to complete lunacy. Just to name a few, there's Above Top Secret, Rents, Educate Yourself, The Unhive Mind, KJOS Ministries, or however that's said, Freemasonry Watch, Watch Unto Prayer, Conspiracy Archive, formerly Illuminati Conspiracy Archive, David Icke, Etymonyky, however the hell you say that, Henry Macaw, or Macau, I don't know how to say anything today, Scholars for 9/11 Truth and Justice, and Center for Research on Globalization. Go stretch and grab yourself a beer, because the best half of the show is coming up.
I eat popcorn. Everybody eats popcorn. She tastes real nice. Get yourself some now at our refreshment stand.
We now return to Mr. Newton's neighborhood. Topic number 3, how can fake news be harmful? The first and maybe most obvious way fake news can be dangerous is in hyper-partisan news. Hyper-partisan news. Getting tongue-tied. Hyper-partisan news creates an illusion of a great divide and lumps the opposite party into one-dimensional stereotypes like liberal snowflakes and right-wing bigots. And by consuming hyper-partisan news, we separate ourselves. We're creating a tribal mentality of us versus them. You'll also find that what you believe about the opposing party is often just bullshit. For example, if you watch Fox News, you may believe that the libs are waging a war on Christmas and want to take away your guns. If you consume left-wing media, you may think all conservatives want a war on science and Trump supporters are all racist. Yes, there are a few who fall into these extreme categories, but the hyper-partisan news makes it look like these lunatics are the majority. If it's hard for you to imagine the opposing party voting for their candidate for legitimate reasons, then you've probably fallen for hyper-partisan news bias. Nobody went out to vote with bad intentions. Everyone did what they thought was right. This is why facts are important. In this case, more important than emotions, because politicians use that to manipulate, but we'll get back to that. Now more than ever, it's important to listen to each other and address the issues, not caricature people. You have biases and fake news exploits them. There's a good chance that your biases got you to believe fake stories, and maybe even vote for or against a candidate based on lies or misinformation. I'd like to sarcastically now thank most of mainstream news outlets for not talking about important issues and only focusing on emails and grabbing crotches. Not to say those weren't important topics, but, you know, it pretty much sums up most of people's knowledge about the candidates. We got the pussy grabber. An uninformed and misinformed public can be dangerous, and a lot of this is due to fake news, hyper-partisan news, and the lack of important news in the mainstream media. People also consume news and vote based on fear. Did you vote Trump or Clinton because you were afraid of what the other candidate would do because they're just the ultimate evil? Politicians often campaign with fear because it gets votes. And fake and misleading news also runs based on fear, and often it's run with a biased fear. Now I'm going to say something a little bold here. I'd go as far as to arguing that sticking strongly to a party might be more dangerous than fake news itself. Parties separate us. I'll get back to that in a second though. So, we did have at least one major event that could have easily caused the deaths of innocent people at the hands of a fake news story. It is now what's known as Pizzagate, a conspiracy theory where there was a fake news story that Hillary Clinton was tied to a child sex trafficking ring being run out of the basement of a pizza parlor that didn't even have a basement. This resulted in a man acting as a vigilante entering the pizza shop and firing an assault rifle. Our neighbor's channel, Dr. Magnifishit, has more details on Pizzagate in his Top Fake News Stories of 2016 video. Finally, topic number 4. How can we spot fake news? The day after the inauguration of Trump, I saw this meme pop up repeatedly showing the crowd at Trump's inauguration versus Obama's. I thought it looked like an obvious, liberal meme created to make Trump look bad. Well, sometimes these things actually turn out to be true. They were real pictures of the Trump and Obama inauguration. In this case, this meme actually turned out to be correct. But that's not usually the case. The fake news started shortly after that, when Trump claimed that the pictures were fake. So, Trump started a fake news story. However, it's extremely rare that a partisan meme like this turns out to be true. A huge source of fake news is chain emails. So let's take a quick look at those. You can pretty much double down that the email that you got was fake news. The more popular an email is, the more it's been forwarded, the more likely it is to be false. When the top 25 forwarded emails are fact-checked, oftentimes only 1 in 25 turns out to be true. So there's your email tip. Next tip. Does it have a bunch of spelling and grammatical errors? This might not seem like a big deal because actual journalists do make spelling and grammar error mistakes, and once in a while the editors miss it. But overall, this is really rare in actual news. Exclamation points! This does not make an author's point stronger. Just because you yell something doesn't make your point valid. Just because it's in all caps doesn't mean it's true. The facts should speak for themselves without having to be overdramatic. Next tip is the author anonymous. Remember Justin Kohler? He remained anonymous for quite a while. If you're telling the truth, why hide it? Check the numbers. Every time there's numbers, check them. Did you hear that Bill Clinton had more soldiers die on his watch than George W. Bush? It's not true. Did you hear that the physics of the Twin Towers collapsing could only be caused by a controlled demolition? Well, what do most physicists say? Whenever there's numbers available, check them. Check the numbers. Okay, next, what's the headline say? It doesn't matter. Sometimes headlines can be misleading to get your attention, and sometimes complex topics are hard to summarize in a headline. But be very skeptical of sensational headlines. They are often a good sign of fake news. Relating to sensational headlines, how sensational is the story? Does it seem too crazy to be true? It just might be. Sort of connected to conspiracy theories is the attack on something or someone non-specific. Does it generalize? So like, does it say vague things like the liberal or the conservative elite, Washington, the Trump supporters, Hillary supporters, they or them? If there's a specific claim, there should be a specific source. So ask, is everyone lumped into the same category? What's the source? So ask, does the news source have references? Reputable news organizations should give sources. Also ask, is the source reliable? And, as I just mentioned, is it a specific source? Also, beware the phrase, some people say or some say. Claiming that some people said something isn't a source. They're not an eyewitness. They're not even probably a real person when this is done. And, speaking of eyewitnesses, on-the-scene testimonials.
So I f***ing ran up behind him with a hatchet, smash, smash, smash! Yeah.
Sometimes this is great if there's multiple witnesses, but if it's just one person, be skeptical. Although you'd think an eyewitness is reliable, they're often not. Our brains only take in what we think is important at the time something is happening. So ask, are there several witnesses? And are those witnesses consistent? Is there video? Because that's a hell of a lot more reliable than one eyewitness. To quote the movie Memento,
look, memory can change the shape of a room, it can change the color of a car. And memories can be distorted. They're just an interpretation, they're not a record. And they're irrelevant if you have the facts.
I'm an artist, see? I'm not an amazing one, but good enough. However, I could not draw a lot of people that I see on a regular basis from memory unless I was making mental notes about their features with the intent to draw them later. Police sketches aren't reliable even if the artist is fantastic because they rely on eyewitness accounts. The police sketches have been estimated to be roughly about 9% accurate. And computer-generated images have an even lower accuracy rating. Next tip. Context. Are they citing a document or a quote that looks terrifying? Are they citing something from a famous person that sounds fantastic? Read the entire quote or document in its context. In fake news, they often use only a portion of a document or a quote out of context. So, next tip. Cross-reference. What do other news sources have to say about it? When I first got interested in politics, I would read the opinion section of the newspaper and listen or read. I wasn't listening to the paper, that wouldn't do much good. I would read with an open mind to both sides of a debate. Luckily, nobody tried to sway me into a specific party position when I was young. Now, the most important point in spotting fake news, fact-checking. So, how do you fact-check news? With things like the WikiLeaks DNC emails and Hillary Clinton emails, it's rather time-consuming. If you don't want to spend 80 hours reading emails, you can go to people whose job it is to fact-check. However, if you love spending your life reading emails, go for it. Fact-checking sites are your friend. I've seen liberals and conservatives label the same sites as biased toward the opposite party based on the story. Just grow a pair and admit you believed something that wasn't true. It's not a big deal. We all fall for bullshit once in a while. PolitiFact.com, FactCheck.org, and Snopes.com are great fact-checking sites. Their job is to get to the sources and fact-check. And if you want to dig deeper, they give sources for their info. If you can't find the facts in a specific claim on the fact-checking sites, then FactCheck.org even has an Ask Fact Check feature that allows you to ask fact-checkers specific questions. And if you want to know if a news source is legit, Snopes keeps a list of fake news sites. Speaking of legitimate news, how do we know who is legitimate news? Legitimate news sources know they're run by humans and therefore bound to make errors, like we talked about earlier. They'll have correction pages just for this reason, but even biased news sources may put up corrections, so beware of everyone. The mainstream media could just flat out fact check instead of what they often do, which is showing both sides of a story when there may only be one truth on one side and a lie on the other. My advice to mainstream media, who's losing followers to alternative news sources, is If someone says something that's not true, fact check the shit out of them. Mainstream media should identify the lies and refute them more often than they're told. So, if you're listening, mainstream media, every time a politician lies, just flat out refute it. Don't have a biased commentator come on and make excuses for the lie and debate it. When you have people debating about a lie, you give weight to the lie. There's no such thing as alternative facts. You have ideas, statistics, probabilities, facts, and lies. Let's demand that our preferred news sources fact check. So, who can we rely on? Got sidetracked there. Well, we can look at the consumers of who various news outlets are from left to right, like in this chart, but that doesn't really tell us what's factually accurate and less biased. It just shows what liberals and conservatives consume. However, when fact-checked, here's where 3 mainstream news networks fell. I put Fox on there because it's actually the most consumed news outlet of any other news outlet. And speaking of Fox, Fox was the least accurate with the most falsehoods. MSNBC and NBC were a mixed bag of almost 50-50. CNN was the winner! CNN definitely was the most factual, but it still had 11% of mostly false to pants on fire claims. Surveys showed that NPR listeners were the most informed and Fox viewers were the least informed. So we know we should at least avoid Fox like the plague as far as mainstream news goes, since they were the least accurate with the most lies and had the least informed viewers. The most reliable and unbiased news sources when fact-checked seem to be the New York Times, Washington Post, PBS NewsHour, and in the lead for most accurate was the BBC. Okay, now for something that's going to piss about half of you off. Conservatives fall for fake news at much higher rates than liberals. There have been multiple studies done asking why this is, since neither liberals nor conservatives seem to be more intelligent. And of course, both groups aren't immune to faulty thinking. Some of the most factually accurate news sources are consumed by liberals. It's not that these sites are necessarily liberally run, or that liberals have a monopoly on the facts, it's just that liberals seem more willing to point out when their own party members are doing something wrong. And they are more comfortable with nuance and being wrong. And they don't seem to have as hard of a time changing their minds when they're wrong. In a study by the University College London, people who strongly identified as liberal generally had a larger anterior cingulate cortex, while those who self-identified as conservatives generally had larger amygdalas. The anterior cingulate cortex is involved in decision-making, while the amygdalas deal with processing fear and emotional learning. This might partially explain why conservatives fall for fake news targeted toward them more often, since it's more emotionally charged and uses fear of the opposing candidates more frequently, and why the liberals would quickly debunk Justin Kohler's fake liberal news stories. Now, this isn't a bad thing, I'm not picking on the conservatives, it just means that liberals and conservatives tend to have different strengths. If it pissed you off that I said liberals are more factually accurate and conservatives fall for more fake news, then do something about it. Don't be afraid to admit when your party members are wrong, and point out when your news source is biased, misleading, or lying. This is what liberals do. They're not as afraid to call foul on their own party members. Make your own preferred media outlets be accountable for their errors, and then the liberals don't have to have a monopoly on the truth. Now, since it feels like I just pissed all over the conservatives parade, I'm gonna piss off the liberals. Liberals often believe a lot of new age bullshit like psychics. Liberals had a hard time when shown opposing information on the topic of fracking and nuclear power. I almost George Bushed on you there. Both parties have people who think GMOs are inherently dangerous and think that vaccines could be dangerous. But anti-vaxxers have a strong liberal bias. Okay, so the social justice warriors are an extremist group that is overly politically correct. And although most liberals don't align with them, I'm not even going to get into social justice warriors, I'll just rant. People on the right and even the left often vote with their gut, not their brains. This is everybody. Facts matter. I'd of course argue that facts are more important because we live in reality, but another part of reality is that patriotic sounding speeches sprinkled with fear and words like faith get votes. Not because they're actually true, but because they feel true. Facts matter. Facts are how we build our houses and fix our cars. We don't arbitrarily decide a 2x4 has different measurements based on how we feel, or we'd never get our homes built. We don't decide to put diesel fuel in a Lexus because we feel like it'll be more powerful. We don't create cures for diseases based on the feeling that something will work. We didn't make a guess on how to fly to the moon or feel like we should fly this way. We had to build a rocket based on the facts of physics. You're watching this video right now because we base our technology on how the world works, not how we think it should work. Facts drive progress, and I hate to break it to you, but global warming is not a political issue. You can't pick and choose what facts science has shown to be true. If you disagree, then do the rest of the world a favor and decide not to believe in gravity and jump off the Empire State Building and see how well that works out for you. Sorry I ranted there. So whatever news you consume, the bottom line is fact check. And when you find out you're wrong, just accept it. It's not a big deal. There's nothing wrong with being wrong. The liberals aren't out to destroy democracy, and neither are the conservatives. Everyone wants what's best for the country, so let's stop lumping each other into narrow categories and start working together. We need each other. When I vote, I try to vote for what's best for everyone and not to shove my personal beliefs into the ballot box. We all have to share the planet in this country with each other. I always remember what Noam Chomsky said. If you don't believe in freedom of expression for those you despise, you don't believe in it at all. But here's the sad truth we are all facing right now. Donald Trump believes in conspiracy theories, and he admires conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. When we have a president who believes in conspiracy theories, we have someone in power making important and potentially life-threatening decisions based on pure imagination, lies, and paranoia. Not only that, but just about every time Trump calls someone fake news, it's because they told the truth, a truth he just didn't like. On February 24th, Trump blocked CNN, New York Times, and Los Angeles Times and others from entering the press briefing, but allowed conservative and far-right outlets in. He also wanted to get InfoWars on the list of accepted press. Well, our Republican president is attempting to create a conservative safe space in the White House and the nation and in the press. Looks like the Republicans are the snowflakes now. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, nobody should censor the press. As biased as media can get, freedom of speech is one of the most important values of the United States. And if you agree with Trump on not allowing certain media outlets into the press briefing, you do not believe in freedom of speech, and you run the risk of threatening your own freedom of speech. Okay, so if you want to hear some of the top fake news stories of 2016, watch our neighbor's channel and partner, Dr. Magnifishit's video, Fake News Stories of 2016. His video is a lot more fun and doesn't end on an intense note like I just did on my rant. Thanks for watching.
Mr. Newton's Neighborhood was made possible by viewers like you.
Be a neighbor and subscribe. Peace out.